covering transition in 30 minutes is really, really difficult. And that's particularly true in a group like this, where you have some people who, in fact, or adult services, where in fact you have some people who have sons and daughters who are older, some are younger, some of you receive regional center services and some do not. And so that's a really challenging audience to talk to within 30 minutes. And so one of the things I want to start off with is that that there are a number of very excellent transition guides. So I'd like to start off with that. This is one of my favorite transition guides if you have students who are currently in school. If you're trying to understand IEPs, 504s, what should be happening in high school, this is an amazing transition workbook. And I have a worksheet up on the front table that list 5 transition guides that I'll be covering here. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that I don't encourage families to try to find URLs, because URLs will shift. And so one of the things that I oftentimes will give is enough information on my handouts so that you can just simply do a search of that term, and it will come up with the guide, with the information that you're looking for. So this is an amazing transition guide. I do have to say it is written for educators as well as families, but it is very technical. But it is a fantastic resource. This next one is one that I happen to have some copies of at the front desk, and it's What's Next. This is written by a woman with cerebral palsy. It's put out by UCSF's Office of Developmental Primary Care, and it is not a guide regarding how to navigate transition in school, although it does cover that. It's really much more focused on the issues of what are the things that, as you have sons and daughters who are starting to make the transition into maturity and adult services, what are the things that you and your son or daughter should be thinking about, and how do you navigate that transition? I want to just mention that the last presenter said something that's really important, that people with developmental disabilities, the transition into maturing as adults happens much later. And we really are, it's so important for families who have people who are in their late adolescence, early adulthood, to recognize that many of the maturing kinds of experiences that typically developing kids have don't happen till much later in life for many people with disabilities. And so that maturation that typically happens when people start to drive and date and have their first jobs oftentimes comes much later, but know that it does happen. I can't tell you how many families I've worked with who their sons and daughters are in their 40s and 50s, and they're literally saying, oh my gosh, I didn't think this would ever happen. And so that maturation does happen. It may happen slower. The Alta California Regional Center has put out a very, very excellent guide to adult services. This is available on their website. It is, again, it's on the handout that I have at the front table. For people who have regional center services and you're looking at like what's available as far as supports for employment or independent living, supported living, the whole range of options are listed here. If you're not within Alta California Regional Center service, but you do receive regional center services from a different regional center, this guide is still an appropriate guide for you to look at, because it's not saying which services are available here. It's what do regional centers offer. So this is an excellent guide. These next 2 guides, I have to put a plug. My wife is actually the person who did this. But these are guides for success in college and success for employment. And what I like about these guides is that they were drawn after extensive interviews with people who had developmental disabilities. And the interviewees were simply asked questions about what made it so that you would be successful in college, or what made it so that you were successful in employment. And the guides are written using the quotes from the people who were interviewed. And in addition to the quotes, it's threaded through with information that expands on some of the topics that the people touched on. So if the person talked about the DSPS at college, there's a little blurb that explains what the DSPS is and how you get that service. So these are excellent resources as well. So again, I want to start off a little bit before we start talking about adult services in general, a little bit about what the transition process should be happening. And when I'm talking transition right now, I'm not talking about transition within the school so much as like what we need to be thinking about to move ourselves as well as our sons and daughters into adulthood. As we think about what we're going to do and what services we need to be looking at, the first thing to think about is where will my son or daughter, where will they end up in life? Are they going to be living in their own home? If they are, what kinds of supports will they need? And so as we start to ask these questions, it will guide us towards what kinds of services and what kinds of things that we should be working on even within ourselves, in our homes, to prepare people towards those outcomes. So really, this is a time to explore what is it that our sons and daughters want to do. And that's a really important conversation to have with the people that we love. If we're simply making those decisions in our own mind, we may be really missing out on what's important to our sons and daughters. So have those conversations. They are hard conversations, particularly for people who may not see that they may have a goal, but it's hard for them to identify, like, well, I don't know if that's possible. And so assure people that what we're going to do is first to start about what is your dream? What is it that you want? And we'll figure out how to get there. One of the things that we encourage is what opportunities exist now to prepare people towards what their dream is. And one of the things that I very, very much encourage people to do is start to do things outside of the house and allow people some opportunity to do things away from us. And volunteering is a great example. When people volunteer, it's an opportunity for them to go somewhere else that's safe, get some direction from someone other than us, and really learn the value of I can do something and I can contribute and I can function with supports from someone other than family. And so exploring, like, what is it that we can start to do to allow people to develop some autonomy, to develop some experience, and develop an idea that they are effective and capable in some things that they are interested in doing. And one of the things, this last point, is that it's important to understand how many people here have sons and daughters who are still in school and still in primary high school. Okay. It's important to understand that when you're in school, you have one place that will provide you with the services and the supports that you need. It's not easy to get that, I recognize, but you have one place that you're dealing with. When you are moving out of school into adult services, you are dealing with a multitude of different agencies that each have their own criteria for eligibility, their own expectations, their own things that are required to be successful. And so one of the things that I very much encourage families who still have sons and daughters who are in school is start to explore which services do I think that my son or daughter will be eligible for in the future, and get a good understanding of that, because if you're doing that as your son or daughter is starting to graduate, you will be overwhelmed and you will not be prepared. And so taking an early proactive look at the services that your son or daughter may be eligible for is going to be very important. And my recommendation is that we encourage our schools to partner with us on that. It's, again, I look at families, I look at this group, and I recognize how overwhelmed a lot of families are. And it's not that I'm expecting each one of you to do this individually. Partner with your schools, partner with professionals, partner with other parents, because it's going to be very hard to find the services that will be appropriate for you. And again, one of the things I'll offer is that Terry and I here, Warmline, there are places in the community that can guide and support you through that process, but start early. That's my major point, start early. Again, one of the things that we need to start doing is exploring people's interests, exploring their passions. I want to just let people know that one of the things that I think we underutilize is assistive technology. We live in a very different age than we did 15, 20 years ago. And there's a number of applications that are out there that can help people to be far more successful and independent than if they're trying to do it alone. I have up here on February 12th here at the Mind Institute in this very room, we will have an assistive technology fair. And I very much encourage you, if possible, for you to attend that. There are some of these save the date flyers that are up on the Mind Institute's table up front, and I encourage you to pick one up and just mark that as on your calendars. With assistive technology can not only help with people living independently in their home, but for people who will be attending college, one of the things that's really important is to recognize, as was said earlier, that there is a very significant change in the way that people are educated up and through their senior year of high school as what happens in college. And one of the things that colleges are excellent is all colleges, public colleges, have a disability student program, and they also have assistive technology centers. The one thing I will tell you is that college is so demanding that the worst time in the world to start to use technology is your freshman year of college. It is, if you can figure out the assistive technology that your son or daughter will use in college and start to use that within high school, then you will be far, far more successful. And so again, with that, I encourage people to come to the Assistive Technology Fair, and it will really, I think, open your eyes to the possibilities. There's a couple of things that I wanted to highlight also on the slide, and one of the things is that how important it is for you to not only look at websites of the services that exist, but to actually visit them. See those sites for yourself. See if there's something that you can imagine your son or daughter, and as a matter of fact, bring them with you. And see if those are services that are done in a way that your son or daughter can be successful with, but also are they things that your son or daughter is going to feel are truly expressing who they are. One of the things that I have seen occasionally is for people to go to services, and when they look at the other people that are being served, they're like, is this who you think I am? Do you think that I require this level of support? Do you think that I require this kind of service? And so going to those services in advance is something that is really, really helpful so that you can make sure that those services are appropriate and that they're a good match. One of the things that I very much encourage for families is to encourage your sons and daughters to be active in the IEP 504 process at school. One of the things that will be required for people with disabilities is to know their disabilities, to know the strengths that they have, to be able to talk about the supports that they will require to be successful, And IEP process is something that can really allow people to develop that skill. And one of the things that I know about IEPs and 504 meetings is that they're very, very regimented. And so when families have asked, like, how do I do that? How do we get, time, how do we get time set aside within that meeting? How do we make it to where it's not something that just gets swept aside? Is to create a PowerPoint and have that be introduced in advance, so that, because one of the values of a PowerPoint is that it is a structured thing, and you say, oh, I still have 5 slides left. And so it's an opportunity for your son and daughter to have a real voice within that meeting. And what happens on a PowerPoint is you talk about, what are my strengths? What are the things that I like about school? What are the things that I think that I need more support in, and how does that support happen? Those are exactly the same things that's going to happen in employment. They're going to have to know how to say that to a business and to an employer. And so again, this is something that is really, really helpful during school, and it's a life skill that would be required after school. I first started with employment in 1985. And employment supports at that point was something that was still in its real infancy with people with developmental disabilities, and there were some significant changes to Social Security that happened during that time as well. With employment, as was mentioned again in some of the previous talks that were happening, people can be very successful in employment. And you look at the challenge of what happens within the school. School is a very academic, very regimented, there's one kind of way to do things. And employment has a huge spectrum of activities that are possible. There's a huge difference in terms of the acceptance of coworkers as compared to other students. And one of the things that I will say is that I have known so many people who've told me as they start to enter employment, is that's the first time in their life that they feel accepted and truly successful. And that's so interesting, because I think a lot of families and professionals as well think that employment is the larger hurdle for people with disabilities. I will say it's not easy to find employment, but we have some good strategies on how to do that, and I'll talk about one of them in a little bit. I'm so grateful to learn about the accelerator program, and I encourage them to actually join in a project that I facilitate here at the Mind Institute. But I will just say this, that our generic services, the American Job Centers, Department of Rehabilitations, 5-10 years ago, they were not very equipped to deal with people who had developmental disabilities. 99% of the people they see have physical disabilities. There has been a radical shift in those services to learn about and serve people with developmental disabilities in a very different way. And so I have some fantastic connections with the American Job Centers, who are really working to prepare students with basic job skills, resume development, practice interviews. And once they have done their work, they are doing warm handoffs with Department of Rehabilitation counselors that they have also worked with, so that they can develop effective kinds of job strategies so that they can match people with employment. And one of the things that is really exciting that I need to make sure that I emphasize is that in the past couple of years, there has been an explosion between the regional centers and the Department of Rehabilitation of paid internship opportunities for people. And paid internships are an amazing opportunity for people to get past the barriers of job applications, resumes, which oftentimes our experiences don't translate well into those compared to people who are typically developing, So it's a way of bypassing that process as well as the interview process, which really can be challenging for people, for both with people with disabilities as well as challenging for the employers to be able to select people based on the types of ways that people are presenting. So the paid internships opportunities that are happening through the regional centers and the Department of Rehabilitation have created an explosion of well-paying, high-level employment opportunities for people who have disabilities. It's been amazing. The opportunity that I mentioned earlier, and I encourage people to visit the site. This is one of the pages on our the webpage here at the Mine Institute, is Northern California Business Advisory Council. And what we have done is we have teamed together all the supported employment agencies, the Department of Rehabilitation, the American Job Centers, and we've worked together to professionalize that and make sure that everyone is working in concert. And then we hold meetings with businesses where we have businesses that have teamed with us present to other businesses about the capabilities of people with disabilities and the ways that they have gotten services through our network. And it's a huge leap forward compared to our agencies knocking on individual businesses' doors individually. This is an opportunity for us to present to a number of businesses at the same time, and it turns from us being a salesperson to the businesses sharing their experiences and their successes. Living away from home is something that many families worry about, is how will my son or daughter be able to do that? And one of the things that I encourage families to work on early is, again, practicing skills early when people are young, starting to develop some competency and some just feeling secure that our sons and daughters are capable of doing it, as well as kind of pride and experience for our sons and daughters in those tasks. There are a range of services that are available. The Department of Rehabilitation funds what they call independent living centers, which, I'll be honest, offer very, very basic services. But again, I have a resource about that service up on our table. For families who have regional center services, there's a wealth of supported living and independent living options that are available. But learn about those early. Learn about those kinds of supports before you need them. And I also just want to point out that those services are impacted. Do not wait until you think that you're no longer able to support your sons and daughters before you make the request to start to receive services, because those services are impacted, and we have had some really bad situations when families are unexpectedly unable to care for their son and daughter, and they have not been prepared to take that next step and to know where they will live and who's going to support them in that process. This is a really important issue. Conservatorship is something that is a very, very important option for some people who have disabilities. For people who genuinely cannot make decisions for themselves, and even with, they can't do that even with all of the supports that happen around them, including regional centers services, families, people within their network. It is an important option. I will say that our process of conservatorship has really been broken, and that there is now, at this point, a belief amongst many families that's being supported by a lot of our attorneys in the area and other kinds of networks, that conservatorship is something that is basically a rite of passage for all people who have disabilities. And the one thing I would caution about is to understand that there are many, many ways for families to stay connected and to stay involved in people's lives without needing to go into conservatorship. If it's something that's really required, again, I fully support that. But when people really are doing it for people who have capacity, there are some ways that can really backfire against the person with disability and their families. It is a legal, lifelong process that's almost irreversible. And so as we talked about earlier, one of the pushes of conservatorship is for families to do that when their son and daughter hits 18. And as we talked about earlier, for many people, they will develop and mature much later than 18. And so when we do that at 18, then we are locking people into a process that, again, is very difficult to undo. And so we do have another webpage that I encourage people to visit, which is our supported decision-making page on the Mind Institute's website. And it will talk about the supported decision-making model and how that can work for people. We are doing 5 regional trainings starting from January through May of next year, ranging from San Diego, LA, Stockton, and Sacramento area, the Bay Area, and far northern area. So please, if you're thinking about conservatorship, before you make that decision, just check out our supported decision-making page and see what alternatives exist. I just want to just mention for a lot of families, there's a question about if your sons and daughters are in high school, there's a question about oftentimes, should we do the graduation route or should we go into the process of having the secondary transition services that are available to 22? There's a couple of things I caution about with that, and the first one is that regional centers will not pay for services until your son and daughter are past the age of 22 if they do not have a diploma. And so if you have the opportunity to graduate and you delay that or do not take that and you go into transition services, just know that your sons and daughters will be in transition services but not receive any regional center supports until they're 23 years old. And the other part of that is before you make that decision, again, I'm going to just focus on this. Make sure you visit the site as before you make the decision of if I want to go into transition services. And what I want to do is, again, offer that if you have follow-up questions, unfortunately I cannot stay today, but I do have my card on the table, and you can make an appointment to speak with me. I will always say, please email me rather than trying to call my phone number, because I'm never at my desk and my red light has been on for 6 months. So I do encourage families who have questions. If you have specific questions for me, please feel free to follow up, and I'd be happy to partner with you. Thank you.